On an early November morning in the year 2000, the badly decomposed remains of a young woman were discovered by a member of the public on the outskirts of a village situated within England's North Yorkshire countryside. A swift identification of the victim ended the search for a 21-year-old reported missing 6 weeks earlier from the town of Middlesbrough, roughly 20 miles away. In the years following, a number of violent offenders would go on to be linked with the murder by both the police and the media as the victim's family continuously appealed for information. Police would be granted significant additional funding in 2018 in an effort to finally identify the person or persons responsible. Welcome to the Crime Portal. This is the case of Vicky Glass. Vicky Glass was born on the 21st of September 1979 in Stockton-on-Tees, more commonly referred to as Stockton, which is a market town located on the northern banks of the River Tees in northeast England. Vicky had an older sister named Claire who was 1 year her senior. Their parents Deborah and Anthony separated when Vicky was just 6 years old. Her mother would go on to remarry a man named Colin Goodall, and in the process Vicky would gain an older stepsister, Cheryl. She also had a younger brother, Thomas. The newly formed and close-knit family continued to reside in Stockton. Growing up, music was Vicky's main passion. She was an avid fan of Michael Jackson and would watch the musical Cats at any given opportunity. Between the ages of 13 and 18, Vicky played in a local jazz band. She is said to have enjoyed travelling with her bandmates and performing to crowds. She attended Blakestone Secondary School, which was replaced by North Shore Academy in 2010. She achieved 5 GCSEs before securing a job at a factory in Teesside. Sadly, at the age of 18, Vicky's lifestyle is reported to have changed dramatically. After falling in with a bad crowd, she was introduced to heroin. Vicky quickly developed an addiction to the drug and eventually turned to sex work to fund her habit. She was known to operate in the Cannon Park and Gresham areas of Middlesbrough, roughly 5 miles east of Stockton. In 1999, Vicky was living homeless and suffering with a bad chest infection. Through a friend, she was introduced to a man living at 16 Petch Close in Middlesbrough and was offered shelter while she recovered. Vicky continued to stay at the address for a number of months, during which time her male cohabitant is reported to have looked after her and ensured she was attending doctor's appointments. Sadly, Vicky remained addicted to drugs and continued to perform sex work. On Saturday, the 23rd of September 2000, just a few days after celebrating her 21st birthday, Vicky and a friend left the house at Petch Close at around midday. It is known that Vicky was in the Cannon Park and Gresham areas of Middlesbrough later that day conducting sex work. At around midnight, Vicky met a client on Borough Road in the centre of Middlesbrough. The two made the short trip to 104 Princes Road, an address reported to have been well known to both local drug users and sex workers, which has since been demolished. After staying at the address for a period of time, Vicky and the male left together and flagged down a taxi on nearby Union Street. The taxi took the pair to the man's home in Norton, a roughly 3.5 mile journey. It is known that Vicky only stayed at the house for a short time before calling a taxi and requesting to be taken back to Middlesbrough. The taxi firm, which was frequently used by Vicky, sent a white Vauxhall Vectra with the registration plate R790LFV to pick her up at 4 AM on the morning of Sunday the 24th. Following the short taxi ride, Vicky exited the vehicle at roughly 4:20 AM on the junction of Union Street and Eschwood Square, which is just to the rear of a pub that was then called the Shipmate and is now known as the Junction. The taxi driver is confirmed to have then returned to the firm's main office. The walk to Petch Close, where Vicky was living, takes around 5 minutes on foot from the location she was dropped off. However, she never made it. The male resident of the house at Petch Close grew concerned when he realised Vicky had not returned to the address, and began reaching out to her friends as well as visiting some of the locations she was known to frequent. With no sign of Vicky by the 27th of September, he turned to Cleveland police and an investigation into the disappearance of Vicky Glass was launched. The following week, on the 5th of October, local newspaper The Northern Echo ran an article under the headline "Fears for Missing Vice Girl," describing 21-year-old Vicky as being about 5 foot 3 inches tall, with fair hair, usually worn tied back and having a local accent. They also reported that Vicky was last seen wearing a white t-shirt, light grey trousers and white trainers. A police spokesperson is quoted within this article as stating, "Vicky is a known prostitute who frequents the town centre area and police are concerned for her safety, but are not linking her disappearance with the recent murder of prostitute Kelly Mallinson." Kelly Mallinson was also a heroin addict funding her addiction through sex work and was known to operate in the same areas of Middlesbrough as Vicky at around the same point in time. At the age of 20, Kelly was tragically found dead as a result of asphyxiation on the 10th of September 2000. A man named Sean Tooley was jailed for life in 2001 for Kelly's murder, but he has not been linked with Vicky's disappearance in any way. The month of October would pass with no sign of Vicky as concerns for her welfare continued to grow. Roughly 6 weeks after Vicky's disappearance on Friday, the 3rd of November at 6 AM, a dog walker was making their way along a trail in Danby, a picturesque village nestled in the North Yorkshire moors roughly 20 miles southeast of Middlesbrough. Walking past a ditch roughly 100 metres off West Lane, a road which runs through the centre of the village, they made the grim discovery of naked, badly decomposed female human remains. Police were called to the scene and the victim would quickly be identified as the missing 21-year-old Vicky Glass during a post-mortem examination that weekend. No cause of death was established. A murder investigation was immediately launched by North Yorkshire and Cleveland police. A team of 40 officers began the task of sifting through forensic evidence and the information already gathered on Vicky's last known movements. No clues were reported to have been found at the scene, and the clothes Vicky was wearing at the time of her disappearance were never recovered. Detective Sergeant Brian Dunn, the man tasked with leading the murder inquiry, would tell newspapers, "Somebody knows who is responsible for her death or has information which could prove vital to our inquiry. We need to speak with anyone who knew her, especially clients and girls who worked with her." Due to the village of Danby's popularity with tourists, the following week police appealed directly for people who may have been in the area. A police spokesperson told the Northern Echo, "We believe she may have been taken to the area and that the vehicle that transported her could well have been stopped on a strip of hard standing by the side of the road, just before the entrance to the village." On the 13th of November 2000, Vicky's mother Deborah bravely faced the press to appeal for information and is quoted as saying, "You don't think that you're going to bury your daughter at 21. You think you are going to sort out a wedding and see her married. My heart broke when she got into this life, and it broke again when I heard that she was missing. My concern is that some people are adopting the attitude that she was only a prostitute. The fact she was a prostitute is irrelevant. She was a 21-year-old woman who was found dead on the moors." The following week, posters featuring a photograph of Vicky were displayed in the pub behind which she was last seen, as well as in other areas of the town where sex workers were known to operate. By the 20th of November, it's reported that police had spoken to over 500 people and that over 150 statements had been taken. Those interviewed included previous clients of Vicky and drivers known to use Cannon Park, an overnight lorry park in the centre of Middlesbrough, common with sex workers including Vicky. During the same week, detectives told local reporters they were disappointed with the public response, particularly following the emotional appeal by Vicky's mother Deborah the week prior. On November the 23rd, police made another appeal, this time for a number of specific witnesses to come forward. This came as a result of investigators trawling through more than 70 hours of CCTV footage retrieved from cameras in Middlesbrough town centre. Sadly, these images appear to be lost to time. No significant information is reported to have come from any of these appeals, and it's unclear whether police managed to speak with the individuals in question. In the days leading up to Christmas in 2000, Vicky's father, Tony Glass, and her stepfather, Colin Goodall, both attended the site at which her body was found. The two laid flowers and both made pleas for information that would help bring Vicky's killer or killers to justice. Mr. Glass, quote, "I would say to people, don't be so apathetic. No one deserves this. It just takes a phone call." Reportedly holding back tears, Mr. Goodall added, "The truth is out there. It will only take a phone call from someone to end our suffering." Vicky's mother, Deborah, was too distraught to attend. Appeals continued in the following year as police once again looked to gain information from sex workers in Middlesbrough. DS Brian Dunn is quoted by the Northern Echo in February 2001 as stating, "There are still people out there with information we need to come forward. There are 12 to 15 working prostitutes that we still need to see." In March of the same year, police began to take a closer look at lorry drivers using Middlesbrough's Cannon Park and as a result arrested a 39-year-old married man from the town of Grimsby. He was subsequently released on bail and his identity was never revealed to the public. Police continued to painstakingly review transport records in an effort to trace lorry drivers that were in Middlesbrough the weekend Vicky disappeared. DS Brian Dunn told the Northern Echo in July, "We are talking about a couple of hundred companies. We know the Cannon Park parking facility is used by a number of companies. We have identified people who park there at various times through talking to local prostitutes who have given us details of companies and drivers. We have tracked down a number of boyfriends who had relationships with Vicky or sexual intercourse." Police continued to focus their efforts on investigating lorry drivers in the following months, and in November they appealed for a specific individual to come forward. This person is described in local newspapers as a broadly built male between the ages of 34 and 38 years old. He is said to have had a mole on his left cheek, bushy eyebrows and either white or grey hair. The man is reported to have been delivering washing powder or something similar and was seen leaving the lorry park in the early hours of Sunday the 24th of September 2000, shortly after Vicky went missing. It is also reported that during the evening of September the 23rd, Vicky was given £10 by a lorry driver and also left a bag of clothing with him on the basis she would return for it. Despite the ongoing investigation, 2001 ended with police no closer to catching the person or persons responsible for Vicky's murder. The following year, on the 9th of January 2000, a 47-year-old man would be arrested in connection with Vicky's murder. Despite not being named by police, the man would be identified 2 days after his arrest on January the 11th as Eric Coates, an unmarried resident of Hewby in North Yorkshire, roughly 45 miles south of Middlesbrough. He had been released without charge pending further police investigation. According to reports, it was the third time that Mr. Coates had been questioned in relation to Vicky's murder. While being interviewed by police, the home Mr. Coates shared with his parents was searched, with clothes, diaries, videotapes and a car ultimately being seized. Several properties owned by Mr. Coates' father, Raymond, were also searched in the coastal town of Scarborough, roughly 50 miles southeast of Middlesbrough. Mr. Coates was reportedly unable to provide police with an alibi for his whereabouts on the day of Vicky's murder, but he said it was likely that he was at home due to the date being his father's birthday. Speaking exclusively to the Northern Echo in an effort to protest his innocence, Mr. Coates is quoted as saying, "I didn't do it. Knowing what I know of the people there, I believe her death was a warning and a drug killing. I have answered all of these questions voluntarily before, but because I can't remember a lot of things, they are virtually calling me a liar." Mr. Coates also admitted to using prostitutes and even having met Vicky. He also added, "1 or 2 girls have told me the rumour is she was killed because she owed money for drugs. Nobody deserves that. I hope they catch him." In April of 2002, Mr. Coates would be informed by police that they did not intend to charge him with any involvement in Vicky's murder. He would once again be quoted by the Northern Echo, "This has been a very stressful couple of months for me and my family. I just want to try and get my life back to normal again." Although he would never again be publicly linked with Vicky's murder by police, it is worth noting that in 1994 Eric Coates was jailed for 15 months after being convicted at a Teesside Crown Court of kidnapping and assaulting a Middlesbrough sex worker. He was also cleared of attempted rape and indecent assault on the same woman. In June 2006, he was jailed for 14 years after pleading guilty to 15 sexual crimes against girls aged 11 to 14 and a single mother of 3. Eric's father, Raymond Coates, who was at the time in his late 70s, also faced 12 sex charges but was deemed too ill to stand trial. He was neither formally acquitted nor was he convicted of any offence. It was the second time Raymond had been excused from standing trial for serious offences alongside one of his own sons. In 2003, 46-year-old Philip Nigel Coates was jailed for 13 years after being found guilty of 3 charges of procuring a woman to have sex with his father, 1 of attempted procurement and 1 of inciting a woman to commit a serious sex offence with an animal. Despite his supposed ill health, Raymond Coates, a member of the North Yorkshire County Council in the 1970s, would go on to live until 2015 before choking to death on a sandwich at his home. I was unable to confirm whether his sons are currently alive or still in prison. After deciding Eric Coates was not Vicky's killer, it was announced in July 2002 that Cleveland police would be interviewing a man named John Taylor, who had been handed 2 life sentences that month after pleading guilty to the abduction and murder of a 16-year-old girl named Leanne Tiernan in the West Yorkshire city of Leeds. The 46-year-old divorced father of 2 grabbed the teenager while she was enjoying a Christmas shopping trip to the city centre in 2000. She was taken to Taylor's home and tragically strangled to death. Her body would be found 9 months later. Inspector Jim Tate of Cleveland Police is quoted by newspapers as stating, "Certainly we will be looking at it to see if there are any links between Vicky Glass and this chap. We will be liaising with staff from West Yorkshire Police and will look at all the evidence." To my knowledge, there have been no further updates that mention John Taylor in relation to Vicky's murder. In September 2002, Vicky's mother, Deborah Goodall, would once again appeal through the press for information on the 2nd anniversary of her daughter's passing. "It's just a day-to-day existence. I have thought about taking my own life because the pain is so hard. I believe somebody knows something." Coverage of Vicky's murder slowed until the following year when an inquest would be held in August of 2003. Forensic pathologist Dr. Kenneth Shorrock, who carried out a post-mortem examination of Vicky's body, said he was unable to determine a cause of death. This was apparently due to difficulties caused as a result of the body being badly decomposed, with many parts missing, including all major organs and several bones. It was confirmed that there was no evidence of any injuries and nothing to suggest Vicky had been sexually assaulted. Coroner Michael Oakley recorded an open verdict and was quoted by news outlets as stating, "We don't know how she came to be where she was found. We don't know the cause of death or whether there was a third party directly or indirectly involved in her death." Vicky's mother Deborah and stepfather Colin attended the site in Danby where her body was found to lay flowers later that year. They were joined by news reporters from ITV, and a 21-second clip is still viewable on the ITV website. It shows Deborah visibly fighting back tears as she states, "Vicky did not deserve to die this way. As a child, she had a smile in her eyes, and then she had empty eyes. She never had those smiling eyes again." Sadly, the case would quickly begin to turn cold with no significant lines of inquiry for police to pursue. DS Brian Dunn would tell the Northern Echo in November 2004, "The hunt for the person responsible goes on. This inquiry will always remain open and subject to continual review." In December 2006, Cleveland police revealed to the press that they would be contacting Suffolk police to discuss any possible links between Vicky's disappearance and the tragic discoveries of 5 murdered sex workers on the outskirts of Ipswich, a town roughly 300 miles south of Middlesbrough. The bodies were all discovered within a 2-week time period beginning on the 30th of October 2006. 2 of the victims were asphyxiated, with the remaining 3 having an undetermined cause of death. A man named Stephen Gerald James Wright was arrested on December the 19th and charged on the 21st with all 5 killings. Wright, who was given the nickname the Suffolk Strangler, would be found guilty on all 5 counts of murder in February 2008, receiving life imprisonment with a recommendation that he should never be released. In the days following his sentence, it was reported by various newspapers that Cleveland police would further investigate Stephen Wright in relation to Vicky's murder. Despite the distance between Stephen Wright's confirmed killings and the place Vicky's body was discovered, it is worth noting that the convicted killer was known to have worked as a lorry driver, something which would have no doubt been of interest to Cleveland police given their numerous previous appeals to lorry drivers and transport companies in the past. There would, however, be no more updates suggesting that Stephen Wright was involved in Vicky's murder. To mark the 10-year anniversary of Vicky's death on September the 24th, 2010, her parents would speak to reporters to appeal for information and discuss the emotional turmoil caused by the decade-long search for their daughter's killer. Her mother, Deborah Goodall, is quoted as saying, "I think and talk about her every day and the pain never goes away. Surely somebody must know what happened." Vicky's father, Tony Glass, commented, "I ended up being laid off from my job. I don't go out on my own anymore and I still find it hard to concentrate." Detective Superintendent Gordon Lamb of Cleveland Police also added, "It is 10 years since Vicky went missing. There have been no major breakthroughs, but we will never stop looking for the killer." Unfortunately, no new information is reported to have been gained from the anniversary appeal. Later that year, in December 2010, Vicky's murder was looked at as part of an inquiry established to review any possible crimes committed by recently convicted triple murderer Stephen Griffiths, a man more commonly known as the Crossbow Cannibal. On May the 24th, 2010, Griffiths was arrested and subsequently charged with the murders of 3 sex workers in the West Yorkshire city of Bradford. The crimes committed by Griffiths made global headlines as his third and final murder, that of Suzanne Blamires, was caught on CCTV, parts of which were released to the public. It is believed that he ate parts of some of his victims, with the uneaten parts being put into garbage bags and tossed into a nearby lake. On the 21st of December 2010, Griffiths was convicted of all 3 murders after pleading guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, meaning he will not become eligible for parole and is likely to spend the rest of his life in prison. After reportedly admitting to more killings at the time of his arrest, police compiled a timeline of Griffiths' movements since the age of 14 to check for any potential links between the Bradford murders and any other cases, including Vicky's. Police would however confirm in early January of 2011 that there was no link between Griffiths and Vicky's murder. With the exception of annual appeals to mark each passing anniversary of Vicky's murder, there would be little coverage of the case for a number of years. Sadly, Vicky's mother Deborah passed away in 2015 at the age of 55 without ever finding out how her daughter's life was ended or who was responsible. In 2017, Cleveland Police and Cleveland's Police and Crime Commissioner Barry Coppinger applied for a special grant from the Home Office to fund the investigation of 3 separate historic cases, including the murder of Vicky Glass. The other 2 historic cases also involved young women from Middlesbrough that had been murdered. Donna Marie Keogh was 17 years old when she was reported missing in May 1998, having last been seen in Middlesbrough town centre the previous month. It is believed she was murdered despite her body never being located. In 2015, Deputy Chief Constable Ian Spittle of Cleveland Police issued an apology to Donna's family over failures in the initial investigation. A year later, on the 17th of October 2016, following an independent review of Donna's case, Cleveland Police launched Operation Resolute. a homicide investigation into the circumstances around her disappearance and suspected murder. Despite 2 decades worth of police investigation, nobody has ever been charged with the murder of Donna Marie Keogh. The third historic case Cleveland police were seeking additional resources to investigate more thoroughly was the 2002 murder of 19-year-old Rachel Wilson. The teenager was last seen on May the 31st in the year of her murder, and just like Vicky Glass, she was known to have sadly turned to sex work in order to fund a severe drug addiction. On June the 27th, 2012, Rachel's remains were found on farmland just outside the Colby Newham area of Middlesbrough. A 55-year-old man would be arrested on suspicion of Rachel's murder in June 2014, but was released on bail after extensive questioning, with the investigation remaining active. It was confirmed in April 2018 that Cleveland police were successful in their grant application. Police and Crime Commissioner Barry Coppinger is quoted by various sources as stating, "In such long-standing, unsolved cases as these, my thoughts are always with the family and friends who grieve each day for the unexplained disappearance of their loved ones. It's very important that no stone is left unturned in our efforts to discover what happened to these 3 young women and in seeking justice for them. For that reason, I am delighted we have been successful in a bid for £3.77 million from the Home Office to fund an historic investigation unit which will focus on a range of specific cases which have been investigated before but remain unsolved. The central grant we have received means we will not need to divert funds from day-to-day policing." Cleveland Assistant Chief Constable Jason Harwin also added, "The HIU will look into the deaths of Vicky Glass in 2000, Rachel Wilson in 2002, and the disappearance of Donna Keogh in 1998. There is commonality between the cases through the sex and ages of the victims and all being linked geographically to Middlesbrough. It is too early in the re-investigations to say if there are any other links." In October 2018, news website The North Yorks Enquirer published a detailed article suggesting another high-profile convicted killer could be responsible for Vicky's murder, in addition to the other 2 murders being investigated by the HIU. The article was part of a series looking at possible victims of Christopher Halliwell, a former taxi driver from the town of Swindon responsible for 2 murders. Sian O'Callaghan, a 22-year-old office worker, vanished on a night out with friends in Swindon in March 2011. After becoming separated from her friends, she got into a taxi and was later killed by Halliwell. CCTV led police to Halliwell, who was arrested less than a week later and eventually led police to her body, which was discovered in a shallow grave in Oxfordshire. He then confessed to the murder of another young woman committed 8 years previously, telling detectives where to find her body. 20-year-old Becky Godden Edwards was last seen alive getting into a taxi outside a nightclub in Swindon in January 2003. She was later stabbed and strangled to death by Halliwell. In October 2012, Halliwell pleaded guilty to murdering Sian O'Callaghan and was jailed for life with a minimum term of 25 years. Sadly, because Halliwell had not been cautioned or allowed to speak to a solicitor by lead investigator Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher before admitting to the murder of Becky Godden Edwards, the case was ruled inadmissible by a High Court judge. All charges were subsequently dropped. It was not until 2016, when new evidence was uncovered, that Halliwell was convicted of Becky's murder. It is widely believed Christopher Halliwell is responsible for more murders, primarily because of the gap in time between the 2 murders he was found guilty of. The North Yorks Enquirer article concludes by summarising the following. All 3 women fit Halliwell's victim preferences. Both Rachel Wilson and Vicky Glass were prostitutes. Halliwell used prostitutes and may have become familiar with the centre of Middlesbrough from this interest. Halliwell travelled all over the country for work as a ground worker as well as a taxi driver. Halliwell lived in various northern towns. His father is believed to have lived in the York area. Middlesbrough is about an hour's drive from York along the A19. Halliwell was a keen fisherman and travelled widely. The River Tees has excellent fishing along most of its length. There is also excellent fishing at Scaling Dam, close to the deposition site of Vicky Glass at Danby. This gave him a reason to come to the area. I could not find any record of police publicly referencing Christopher Halliwell in relation to Vicky's murder. In 2021, Cleveland Police HIU would close the first of the 3 historic cases being investigated as a 62-year-old man admitted to the manslaughter of Rachel Wilson. Keith Hall had introduced Rachel to crack cocaine shortly after meeting her at the age of 15 before eventually forcing her into sex work to fund their shared addiction. He had been under investigation by police for a number of years, all the while carrying a lock of Rachel's hair in his wallet. He was ultimately sentenced to 18.5 years in prison. With Hall behind bars, Temporary Detective Superintendent Paula Dewell from the Historic Investigation Unit told ITV News, "I am so proud of the team for their work. They have achieved more than others who have gone before and will go on with the aim of seeking justice for Donna Keogh and Vicky Glass." Friday the 24th of September 2021 marked 21 years to the day since Vicky's last confirmed sighting. Police took this as an opportunity to once again appeal to the public for information. It was announced that following an extensive review of the original investigation by the HIU, a newly formed team led by Detective Chief Inspector Peter Carr would re-investigate Vicky's murder. DCI Carr told ITV News, "Much work has been carried out over the last 12 months on Vicky's case, including a detailed review of the original investigation. This review identified over 300 recommendations, with the main one being that a re-investigation should be undertaken. We believe that there are a number of lines of inquiry which can be pursued, and by using modern investigative and forensic techniques, we hope to get justice for Vicky and her family. We have new and significant lines of inquiry and will be speaking to people connected to the case and trawling through CCTV from the time period to help us with any new leads. Vicky was a vulnerable woman who was exploited by men. She was not a sex worker by choice, but forced by circumstance as a young adult. She had her whole life ahead of her, was loved by her family, she did not deserve to die, and we will continue to seek justice for her murder." DCI Carr also appeared alongside Vicky's sisters on the UK TV show Crime Watch Live. Vicky's sister Claire is quoted as saying, "Our mum passed away 6 years ago, so never got any answers. She didn't get any peace. When this happened, when Vicky died, a piece of mum died with her, and she was never the same again." A website was also launched by police which contains information on Vicky's background, her disappearance, and the investigation into her murder, which can be viewed at www.vickyglass.co.uk. In early November 2022, there would be a major development in the case as police released CCTV footage showing Vicky on the day of her disappearance. DCI Carr addressed the media at a press conference to discuss the newly discovered footage.
CCTV footage of Vicky Glass has been obtained, which shows her in the hours before her disappearance. This footage shows Vicky in company of a friend in the Cannon Park area of Middlesbrough. This has provided us with more detailed information, including exactly what clothing Vicky Glass was wearing on the day of her disappearance. We have spoken to the friend from the CCTV footage, who provided important information in the investigation, including that shortly after the footage was taken, Vicky engaged in conversation with a lorry driver who provided her with some money. Vicky left some personal effects with the driver, and there was an agreement made to meet later in the day. The lorry driver is described as a white male, aged between 34 and 38 years old at the time. He was broad-billed at the time and had a distinctive mole on his face. We released the CCTV footage in the hope that more people come forward to help with the investigation based on details they remember having viewed the footage. We are extremely interested to speak to the lorry driver who Vicky engaged with.
Police also travelled to the village of Danby to hand out flyers and questionnaires to local residents in an attempt to jog the memories of those who were living in the area at the time of the murder. A statement was released to the media from Vicky's family, which read in part, "Vicky was deeply loved by us, and as a family we have been through turmoil, especially as Mam Deborah passed away without any answers, knowing Vicky's killer is out there and people have information they are not coming forward with. Please do the right thing and help get justice for Vicky and give our family some hope of healing. Hopefully the recent and continued efforts of Cleveland Police HIU will result in the identification of the person or persons responsible for Vicky's murder. Any significant further updates in the case will be covered on the channel."
Anyone with information can call the investigation team directly on 01642 301 Cleveland Police via 101, or via Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111. Thank you.
The Crime Portal is a channel dedicated to exploring lesser-known murder and missing persons cases. For more information on this case, or to submit a suggestion for future videos, please visit the Crime Portal website. Thank you for watching.